Welcome to today's panel discussion, and this time around you are with me, Audrey Kaparamura. In this panel discussion, we'll be discussing issues surrounding the need for increased investment in issues of early childhood development and education in the Southern African Development Community, SADC. National networks advocacy capacity strengthened for improved ECDE legislation, policies and measures in the Southern Africa TRANAC, which advocates for improvements in ECD in Southern Africa. The ones we'll be talking about in as far as ECDE is concerned. This is the project that is being implemented in 6 countries of Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So with me, I have 3 panelists. I have Naison Bunu from Zimbabwe Network of ECD. I have Malodi Mefan, Network of ECD Organizations for Lesotho, as well as Joylet Genda from ECD Coalition of Malawi. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. To begin with, let us know why is ECD important for SADC from you?
Thank you very much. ECD is important for everyone, not just SADC, but we especially started the transnational advocacy because there is very little highlight on ECD in the SADC region or even in the region of Africa as a total. So we need to actually start making noise and talking about the importance of ECD, the importance especially of early childhood education, ECE. So this is why it's very important for the SADC region, for the SADC consortium, for the SADC leaders to recognize not only the presence of ECD, because ECD has been around for a long time, but the importance and significance of why we need to put more focus on ECD.
Yes. From Mr. Bunu, maybe why do you think we should talk about ECD in the SADC region?
Thank you very much. ECD in the SADC region, because it has got so many benefits. One, it is economic wise to invest in ECD because the returns are almost from 13% returns to about 17 times what you have invested in. That is actually got through removing the inefficiencies in education, that like dropout rates, like repeating, and also like low performance of children, because it has been proven through studies that children who have gone through good programs in ECD are likely to perform well in school, are likely to have stable families, are likely to be employable, and will enjoy life more than any others. So it makes not only social and cultural, economic means for them to be supported, because this actually will put away even the low literacy and the numeracy rates which are found within the region, in that many children are not able to read, and the literacy levels, especially for grade 1 and 2, and let's say for the first 3 grades in formal school, are very low, mainly because they've not gone through the courses or the steps what are required in ECD. So it's very important for governments to take conscious efforts into actually putting ECD on the agenda.
Let us know from Madam Genda, why do you think ECD is important for SADC, and maybe give us an overview as far as Malawi is concerned. How are we faring?
Thank you very much, Audrey. Yes, ECDE, as my colleagues have already said, it's very important. One of the sectors that are very important in a country. We are talking about education in the early years of a child, of a person. This is very important because the children are stimulated to learn most of the skills that are required in life. So, for instance, in terms of education, we are talking about the intellectual development of the children. We have to stimulate it. So in the first years of life, like between 3 years and 5 years that the children are supposed to be in pre-primary education centers, the preschools, they learn some of the basic skills that are required in education, in formal education. For instance, we talk about reading. They learn the skills on how best they can read. And then even in terms of basic mathematics, they do learn those skills, the numeracy skills, they do learn. And then when they are also given opportunity to interact with some reasoning skills, you give them space to play around with some things, and then they maybe put them together. They do also learn in terms of problem solving, how they can solve a number of problems. So if we really make sure that we give the children an opportunity to start learning from this early stage, it helps to motivate their interest even in education. When they transition into the formal education sector, into primary education, we have already stimulated their interest in learning. So these children, that's why, as Nyson indicated, that it reduces dropout rate in further sections of education. It's because we have stimulated their interest in learning from an early age. So these children tend to be motivated to be in school, and they learn better. And because we have already started providing them the skills to learning, like reading, solving some mathematical problems at that early age. So these children now do perform very well, as Nyson indicated. They perform very well. And then, sometimes if someone is not performing well in school, they drop out. So if all the children would be stimulated at that early age, being given pre-primary education, it means most of our children would perform well in primary and even higher education. They would even transition to the all levels of education because they would be doing well. And the problems that we talk about in terms of dropout, the early marriages issues, they could be solved in a way because most of the children would be staying in school longer. So that's why we are saying early childhood development education is very, very important as a foundation. So like in Malawi, as we say in our local language, to say melampoyamba, this is also very important in human development. We really need to make sure that we invest more in human life from the early years. Yeah, so like in Malawi, we are talking about human capital development as one of the key areas of development that we are focusing in our developmental plans. This is how we can also contribute to developing our human capital. Because if most of the people now stay in school, become more educated, they will learn different skills that they can now use in life, in adulthood. So they can either become successful business persons, they can become different enterprises, and then they will generate a lot of income. And as Nyson indicated, it makes economic sense. That's how we could generate a lot of income. The people will be more productive, they will be engaging in different enterprises. At the end of the day, they will be generating more money for their individual households, at the same time contributing something to the government in form of tax. So that's why we are saying, hey, as SADC, please let us also invest in ECDE. So why are we calling for this increased investment? Audrey, you asked to say what is the situation in Malawi. In Malawi, early childhood development education access rate, it's at about half. Half of our eligible children for this age, they are the ones accessing ECDE at around 47%. So if you look at this, it means we are leaving out more than half of the children without opportunity to undergo this important service. Hence the call for increased investment. And this is not only in Malawi, even in other countries that are within SADC. We have Mozambique, which has got as low as about 6% access rate to pre-primary education. So that's why we are saying, hey, Ministers of Education, as you are meeting at SADC level, please also consider the issue of early childhood development and education.
Thank you so much. What is happening in as far as ECD is concerned, and maybe how do you look at the region at large from Mr. Bolu?
Okay. From the Zimbabwean perspective, yes. But before I go into that, I want also to say that from the child's perspective, the child's brain matures to about 90% in the first 5 years. It means within those 5 years, the adulthood has grown within a child. And if they miss that opportunity to grow with the brain within that period, it means they cannot. But if they are to given another chance, because there are some issues that need to be stimulated and learned within the 5, like the stress management. If it is missed at 3 years, it means they've got to wait until they're about 12 years. And even if they are 12 years, they won't reach that level which was required at that level. So in terms of brain development, it is prudent for the children to have all the developmental milestones met at that level between birth up to 5 years, both in terms of health, in nutrition, in terms of responsive caregiving, which is given by the caregivers or the parents, and also in terms of having them the confidence to be safe. So that is important. Now with Zimbabwe, just like what Joylet has said, there are still very low indicators of education when it comes to ECD compared with primary and secondary education. I can start with what they call the access rate, which is almost like 46%, leaving out 64% who are not in ECD who are supposed to be there. And then if we are coming also to indicators like net enrollment rate, where children going into ECD at the appropriate age, we've got about between 27 and 30%, which means 70% of those who are supposed to be in ECD at the right time are not. Most of them are delayed, although a few are underage. And if we are looking at that in terms of teacher provision, you'll find that the least qualified teachers, there are about 40 children to one teacher instead of 20, which is recommended, which means one teacher is teaching 2 classes. And you'll find that in terms of classroom provision, there are about almost 68 children to one classroom instead of 20 to one classroom. You see how the situation is. And in terms of continuity of learning and transitioning, it's not 100% as is expected, and which as compared to primary and secondary education. So we still have got bottlenecks. When it comes, greatest is the financing. You'll find that in Zimbabwe, it's less than 2% of the education budget going to ECD. But the ECD children constitute almost above 12% of the learners in all the schools, about 60 million to 7 million. They are only given 2%. But if we are taking a regional average, you will see that the regional average is about 1.57% of the education budgets going to ECD. So you can still see that ECD is neglected. So there's need for affirmative action by SADC leaders in order to provide concerted efforts and leadership to provide support to ECD. Yeah.
Thank you so much. In case you have just joined us, this is a panel discussion where we are discussing issues surrounding the need for increased investment in early childhood development and education. And this panel discussion is coming at a time Malawi is hosting a joint meeting of SADC Ministers of Education and Training in Science and Technology and Innovation. Moving forward, let us know maybe what must the ministers do about ECDE as they meet?
Thank you very much. I think the first and most important thing is that ECD needs to be an agenda topic. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be put on the agenda, and it needs to be focused on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first and most important thing. And then we need to look at issues that Ms. Nassim has also alluded to, on issues of financing, issues of access, and issues of accountability in terms of the policy structures that will manage and should manage ECD in order to ensure that it is managed adequately, but also that the provisions, the infrastructure, and everything that the ECD learners need is put into place and managed, as well as monitored and evaluated in a way that there is data that drives the decision makings that are made around that.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the most important topics that we're talking about, and I think I'll allude to my colleagues to add on to that as well.
Madam Genda, maybe just to add.
Yes. I think key is we are looking at how we are operationalizing the agenda on ECDE in SADC, because this is not something that we are just talking as CSOs from our maybe interest to advance ECDE. You see, as a region, Southern Africa, we have committed to uplifting ECDE. For instance, if we come home here to Malawi, we have a policy on ECD, which is clear to say we will provide inclusive, quality ECD service to the children. Now here we are talking about access of about half of the learners, which means we still have a way to go to reach out to the remaining about 50% of the children to access this service. And not just that, as a region that we are talking about, Southern Africa, we have committed to providing for ECDE. This is through the Sustainable Development Goals, which we had signed to as countries. So in the SDGs, there is a Sustainable Development Goal number 4, Target 2, which talks so much about this sector that we are talking about in terms of ECDE, whereby we are really committed to providing for quality ECDE to both boys and girls of ECDE age. And the focus, of course, is on 5-year-olds, so that these ones must access quality early learning service, at least for a year before they transition into the primary school. So now, we are looking at the situation that we have on the ground. For instance, here in Malawi, we have some communities which do not have infrastructure to facilitate this. And then this service is also being provided for by volunteers who no one, manages them. The volunteers are the ones providing for the pre-primary education in Malawi. And even in other countries like Zimbabwe, as you have heard, they still have a gap of a number of children to access the service. So now ours is a call to the responsible officials to say, can we really work on this so that by the year 2030, that we had committed in the Sustainable Development Goals, to say we will provide for ECDE to these children who are eligible for this service. Can we operationalize this service and really deliver to the children that are in need? So we are concerned because if we look at the investment that is in the sector, for instance, in the SADC countries, including Malawi, you find out that there is a low investment, as Nyson indicated, in terms of financing. It's low. So we are now looking at the pace of investments that we have versus the target that we have to provide for ECDE to all children. So when are we doing this? How are we achieving that? Can we deliberate and have a proper way forward that will guide us to really deliver on the commitment? So those are the ideas that we have.
All right. Mr. Bono, do you think there are any other good practices that as a region we can learn from each other?
Yes, definitely. I think learning from the continental education sector agenda, which is called the CESA for OAU, it states that early childhood development is the foundation of all learning. And it is very specific within that. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we have got the education and training protocol in SADC, which does not mention early childhood development, and which we think needs to be included within that protocol, so that ECD is a regional agenda and where others can come and learn. Yes, different countries, as you have asked, have got something that can be learned from. We have got from Zimbabwe, I think the ECD is now annexed and being put as part of the school system. So you have got classrooms which are within the school system, but being separate, but within that, which means that teachers are now paid by government. And the ECD is owned and managed by government. And that's one good issue which is there. We have got also the Malawi model, although we have got the CBCC, which are there. It's also a good model. But what is only missing from it is that it's not fully owned by government or supported. Yes, the efforts by the communities and the private needs to be nurtured and supported, and so that the teachers and the caregivers who are there are also incentivized so that they continue to do their work in a professional way. We have learned also from Lesotho and Malawi that they've got integrated policies which are there. I think the policies on paper, unlike in Zimbabwe and Zambia, where we do not have the integrated policies or the policies either, but those are good, which you can guide. But I think, like what they've said, is the operationalization which is important. We have also learned from even South Africa, which has got an integrated system, and it has included the planning of ECD in its own education agenda. And this is also a good practice that we have learned from that. We have learned also from Zimbabwe that as far back as 2005, there have been teacher training. Every teacher training of the 11 teachers' colleges is training also ECD teachers. They will have the general, but they specialize in. I think also in South Africa, we have learned that they are really focusing on play methodology, which needs to be focused on in all the region, so that it is focused. Because children learn within through learning, and through that, it needs to be done. But also through some services of CSOs. There have been health assessments which have been done, and school feeding, which has been given, which are also good models, which needs to be supported and explored. Rather than tummy filling feeding schemes, they need to be more nutritious and with the diverse needs. Yeah.
All right. From Madam Mefani, do you think there are any important issues that you think the region should standardize?
Yes, there's a number of issues that need to be standardized when it comes to our ECD issues in the region. I think we were discussing some of that today. If Mr. Bono could help me out on that.
Yeah, I think standardization of curriculum, which is competence-based curriculum, but that is not structured as subjects as from primary, but that which is domain-based, which is centered on developmental milestones of children. And it is very important on that, so that there is a distinction between the formal and this pre-formal or preschool, which has got its own methodology. That needs to be done as a curriculum. Second issue is standardization of facilities and infrastructure. Children need classrooms which are not high, but where they can see outside. In case there are fires, they can jump out. If you use the classrooms for the older children, they cannot see, they will not be able to jump out, and even the fresh air will not be as fresh for them as you would want. They need to sit with their feet on the ground like what we are. And if you give them the grade 2, 3 chairs, it means their feet will be dangling in the air, and the blood circulation will be limited. And also they need age-appropriate wash facilities. They need to go into the toilets, especially in rural areas where there are bare toilets. Their walls need to suit them so that they do not mess the walls or they do not fall in or fear. All those need to be standardized as they are. We need standardization also in terms of teacher qualification and competencies, because they differ here and there. You see, Malawi is training its own caregivers, but in Zimbabwe we have got teachers and who are diploma and are paid just like any other teacher within that system. So those issues need to be interrogated and standards set. We need also what we call early learning development standards, where it is shown that for a 3-year-old is able to speak this way or is able to physically do this and that and is able to relate and solve problems with others and can form relationships. All those are early learning development standards which are required.
All right, thank you so much. Maybe because of time, I wish we could go on and go on, but because of time, we are so limited. As we wind up our panel discussion, 30 seconds, Madam Genda, how would you conclude?
Thank you so much, Audrey. In conclusion, it's just to emphasize the need for increasing investment in early childhood development and education. This is the foundation for human development. It determines who an individual will be. So if we invest in this sector, it will help us to have citizens that will be productive, and it's a development strategy. So it's worth really, really investing in.
Madam Mefani, how would you conclude? 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. In Lesotho, we have a saying that you cannot build a house without first laying foundation. And this is what we try to drive, to understand that in order for us to build individuals or human beings that are not only productive, but that contribute not only to the economy, but to the basic human nature or culture of a person, we need to ensure that they have a good foundation. As Mr. Bono highlighted, that foundation is not just about the education part, it's also about the social development, the cognitive development, the physical development. So we need to ensure that they get their foundation, or our children in our future, even countries, they are the foundation for our countries. And so we need to ensure that we build this foundation and for a better future and a better region.
And lastly, Mr. Boone.
Let's get our priorities right and go to the basics. Like what they've been saying, the foundation is the best. And it makes economic sense to invest in ECD. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And on that note, we wind up our panel discussion this time around. Remember, we are talking about the need for increased investment in early childhood development and education in the Southern African Development Community, SADC. This is coming at a time Malawi is hosting a joint meeting of SADC Ministers of Education and Training in Science, Technology and Innovation. You've been with me, Audrey Kaparamula.